I slept with my cousin at my bachelorette party, and my fiancé told everyone at the altar he wouldn't marry me, then projected my cheating video before our entire family. He can't do this to me. The silence, that's what I remember first. Not the collective gasp or the horrified murmur that came later, but that second of absolute silence that fell over the church like a layer of dirty snow. A heavy, dense silence that crushed me inside my €1,000 wedding dress. I was standing at the altar with a rehearsed smile that froze on my face, looking at Hugo. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking over my shoulder at the white wall that rose behind the choir, where a projector was supposed to show a cheesy montage of our photos. Us in Paris, us decorating our first apartment, us laughing with our friends. A monument to our love, perfect. But the first image that appeared was none of those. It was dark, grainy, with the pulsating bass of a reggaeton song that I recognized instantly. The air escaped from my lungs. My bouquet of white peonies suddenly felt like a block of cement in my hands. The screen came to life, and there I was. Me, at my bachelorette party, with a future Mrs. headband crooked on my disheveled hair. My face was flushed from alcohol and euphoria, and I was laughing out loud. And then the camera moved, and Simone, my cousin Simone, came into the frame. His arms wrapped around my waist from behind, and I threw my head back, resting it on his shoulder. It wasn't a compromising image in itself, but it was the prelude. It was the first domino. I felt the gaze of 200 people fixed on my back, a physical and shameful heat that rose up my neck. My mother in the front row had her hand over her mouth, her wide eyes fixed on the screen. Not on me. My mind raced at 1,000 miles per hour, looking for an explanation and escape. It was a mistake. Someone sent the wrong file. But then I looked at Hugo. His face was a mask of icy calm, a serenity that was much more terrifying than any scream. His eyes, those eyes that supposedly adored me, were empty like two dark wells. And I knew. This was not an accident. This was an execution. He had planned it. Every detail, the projector, the exact moment, the public humiliation. A man who loves you confronts you in private. He screams, cries, breaks things. He doesn't turn you into the main spectacle of a public execution in front of your grandmother. The video continued. Blurry scenes of shots, of increasingly close dances, of whispers in the ear. And then the moment, the camera, probably held by one of my friends, followed us down a dark hallway to a secluded room in the bar. The door closed, but the audio continued. Muffled laughter, and then my unmistakable voice saying something that made a wave of nausea rise in my throat. It wasn't the act itself that broke me, but the cold, calculated cruelty of Hugo. To expose it like that, to turn a stupid, drunken mistake into a spectacle for everyone's enjoyment, was of a malice I had never known. He was using my worst moment, a moment of weakness, to completely destroy me. Finally, Hugo turned to me. The priest's microphone was still on, capturing his voice and amplifying it throughout the nave of the church. "I can't," he said with cutting clarity. "I thought I knew who I was marrying." He turned around and started walking down the aisle, leaving behind his dumbfounded family, my devastated family, and me, alone at the altar, bathed in the flickering light of my own betrayal. My first thought was not of guilt, not of regret, it was of a pure, white fury. How dare he? How dare he do this to me? He, who for months had treated me like just another project on his to-do list, now stood as the judge, jury, and executioner. This wasn't about pain, it was about ego. It was revenge, and I was the victim. To understand why what happened at my bachelorette party happened, you have to understand what the previous 6 months were like. People see Hugo as the perfect man, successful, handsome, organized, and he is. But living with that organization is like living in a spreadsheet. Our wedding was not a celebration of our love, it was the link project, as he called it. We had shared folders, color-coded budgets, and weekly meetings to review the event's KPIs. If I suggested something spontaneous, like a surprise mariachi band, he would pull out his tablet and mutter about budget deviations and logistical complexity. Love had become a series of completed tasks. I felt incredibly lonely. I tried to talk to him at night, to tell him my fears, the anxiety that the idea of everything having to be perfect caused me. "Are you sure this is what you want?" I would ask him. He wouldn't even look up from his laptop. "Of course, honey. The florists have already confirmed the order for the hydrangeas. Everything is going according to plan." He didn't listen to me. He heard the words, but not the feeling behind them. I was just another item on his checklist. Get wife, check. I felt like I was slowly drowning in a sea of beige perfection, and he was the one holding my head underwater, smiling and saying that the temperature was ideal. And in the midst of all that emptiness was Simone. Simone has always been more than a cousin to me. He has been my confidant, my accomplice. While Hugo was obsessed with the font of the invitations, Simone would call me to ask how I was doing. "Are you holding up well under the pressure?" he would tell me. "That guy of yours seems like a robot sometimes. Don't forget to breathe." He was the only one who seemed to see me. Not the perfect bride, not the future Mrs. of, but me. The scared and overwhelmed girl who wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Our conversations became more frequent, deeper. I told him things I never told Hugo, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew Hugo wouldn't understand them. He would have classified them as irrational concerns and proposed a pragmatic solution. Simone, on the other hand, simply listened, validated my feelings. He told me I wasn't crazy for feeling that way, that I had a right to feel overwhelmed, to want something more than a perfectly planned life. He was the color in my black and white world. He was the only person who made me feel alive, real. Looking back, I suppose people will say I was having an emotional affair. Maybe, but it didn't feel that way to me. It felt like finding an oasis in the middle of the desert. Hugo offered me security, a future planned down to the last detail. Simone offered me understanding. He offered me a mirror in which I could see myself, not the version of me that Hugo was building. I wasn't looking for trouble, I really wasn't. I was just looking for someone to remind me who I was before I became an item in a budget. The bachelorette party was my only night of freedom. That's how I felt it. My friends organized it, but I insisted they invite Simone. "He's like a brother to me," I told them, and in part it was true. But in another part, the part one didn't dare admit even to myself, I knew I needed him to be there. I needed his energy, his way of looking at me as if I were the only person in the room. Hugo, of course, had reviewed the night's itinerary. "Make sure you don't drink too much. We have the menu tasting at 10 in the morning. He had reminded me with a kiss on the forehead that felt more like a stamp of approval than a gesture of affection. That night, I let loose. Every shot of tequila was a small act of rebellion against spreadsheets and color codes. Every song I danced to with abandon was a way of shaking off the rigidity that had stuck to my body for months. And Simone was by my side the whole time. He brought me drinks, made me laugh until my stomach hurt, told me I was beautiful. When we danced, there was no space between us. I felt the warmth of his body against mine, and it was a real, human warmth, not the calculated, distant warmth of Hugo. It was a connection that didn't need to be planned or discussed in a meeting, it simply existed. The key moment came late, very late. We were in a corner of the bar, the noise and the people around us had faded away. He looked at me intently and said, "You don't have to do this, you know? You don't have to marry him if he doesn't make you happy." His words hit me like a punch in the stomach because they were the truth I had been burying under layers of floral arrangements and guest lists. "I'm happy," I lied, but my voice broke. He shook his head slowly. "No, you're not. I see how he looks at you as if you were his greatest achievement. I look at you and I see you, just you." And that was it. That's what broke me. In that moment, he wasn't my cousin, he was the only person in the world who saw me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and for the first time in a long time, desired for who I was. What happened next is a blur of alcohol and bad decision-making. I followed him down that hallway, aware that one of my friends was filming us, probably thinking it was funny. But I didn't care. For one night, I didn't want to be the perfect bride. I just wanted to be a woman who felt seen. The encounter was clumsy, quick, and full of almost instant regret. But in that instant, in that cheap hotel room, I felt more authentic than at any time in the last year with Hugo. I don't justify it as a good thing. It was a mistake, but it wasn't a malicious act. It wasn't planned. It was a cry for help. It was the inevitable consequence of months of feeling like a ghost in my own life. It was the result of my fiancé treating me like an employee instead of his future wife. Hugo can show that video 1,000 times, but he will never show the context, the emptiness, and the loneliness that led me to that hallway. He only sees the betrayal, not the cause. The silence after the bachelorette party was deafening. I returned to the apartment I shared with Hugo the next morning with a horrible hangover and a guilt that was eating me up inside. He was in his office working, of course. He gave me a quick kiss, smelled the alcohol on my breath, and frowned. I hope you had a good time. Don't forget the menu tasting. And that was it. Not a single question, not a deep look. If he had shown an ounce of real interest, of genuine concern, maybe I would have told him everything. But it was clear that my night of freedom was just an annoyance in his perfectly calibrated schedule. The house of cards collapsed 3 days before the wedding. It was Sarah, my maid of honor, who betrayed me. She came to our apartment with red, swollen eyes. At first, I thought it was because of the stress of the wedding. How naive. She took me to the kitchen and told me she couldn't go on with the lie that she had spoken with Hugo. I told him everything, she whispered without daring to look me in the face. I showed him the video. He deserved to know the truth. The truth? Or was it her way of clearing her own conscience at my expense? The stab in the back didn't come from an enemy, but from one of my best friends. Another person who judged me without understanding anything. The confrontation with Hugo was not what I had imagined. There were no screams, no tears, no broken plates, none of the uncontrolled passion you see in the movies. It was much worse. He waited for me sitting on the living room sofa with his laptop on the coffee table. When I entered, he didn't even look at me. "Sit down," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. I sat on the edge of the armchair opposite, feeling like I was in a performance review. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he asked, and his eyes finally met mine. They were cold, analytical. There was no pain in them, only calculation. I lied to him. At first, I denied everything. I said Sarah was exaggerating, that she was drunk and didn't know what she was saying. He simply raised an eyebrow, then opened his laptop and pressed play. There it was on his high-definition screen, the complete, uncut video. He made me watch the whole thing in a deathly silence. Every laugh, every roast, every whispered word was the most refined torture I have ever experienced. When it was over, he closed the laptop with a soft click. "The wedding is still on," he said. "All the deposits are paid. It would be an unacceptable financial and reputational loss to cancel it." Now I was frozen. That was it, a financial loss. At that moment, any ounce of guilt I felt evaporated and was replaced by an icy anger. He wasn't hurt, he wasn't heartbroken, he was annoyed. Annoyed by the inconvenience, by the stain on his perfect project. His lack of emotion was the definitive proof that he had never loved me. He had only loved the idea of me, the idea of a perfect wedding and a perfect life. I stood up and told him that if he didn't care, we could cancel everything. And he replied with the phrase that sealed his fate in my mind: "No, the show must go on." And then I understood. He didn't want to save the relationship, he wanted revenge, and he would serve it cold. And here I am, back in the present, or what's left of it. The church is almost empty. A few distant relatives are milling around the door, giving me looks that mix pity and contempt. My father came, put a clumsy hand on my shoulder, and said, "You have shamed this family," before taking my mother, who couldn't stop sobbing. My friends, the ones who filmed me and then betrayed me, have vanished. And Simone, I saw him sneak out a side door as soon as the screen lit up. The brave confidant, the illusory soulmate, fled like the rat he is. Everyone has abandoned me. I'm sitting in the front pew with the tulle of my dress piled up around me like a dirty cloud. The projector is still on, now showing a blue screen of death. How ironic. An error. That's what it was. My mistake was sleeping with Simone. Yes, I admit it, but it was a mistake born of desperation, of loneliness, of feeling invisible to the man who was supposed to see me better than anyone. It was a symptom of a much deeper disease in our relationship, his inability to connect, his coldness, his obsession with perfection over people. The real crime, The monstrosity that no one seems to see did not happen in that hotel room. It happened here in the house of God, in front of everyone we love. Hugo could have broken off our engagement in private. He could have yelled at me, humiliated me behind closed doors. It would have been painful, but it would have been human. Instead, he chose the spectacle. He chose total annihilation. He didn't just want to end our relationship. He wanted to salt the earth so that nothing would ever grow again. He wanted to make sure my reputation was left in ashes, that my family was scarred forever. This was not the act of a heartbroken man. A heartbroken man cries, gets angry, seeks comfort. This was the act of a calculating sociopath, someone whose wounded ego was infinitely more important than any feelings he might have had for me. He didn't destroy me because I betrayed him. He destroyed me because I ruined his perfect project. I stained his impeccable record, and for that, I deserved the maximum possible humiliation. He is not a victim. He is an executioner who disguised himself as a groom. So yes, I made a mistake, a terrible and stupid mistake. But my mistake did not give him the right to execute me publicly. What I did was a moment of human weakness. What he did was an act of pure, premeditated evil. And as I sit here in the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my life, I don't feel guilt. I feel a strange, twisted sense of validation. His disproportionate reaction, his calculated cruelty, only proves that I was right all along. He never loved me. And deep down, escaping from a monster like that, even in such a brutal way, might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Popular Reddit comments on the main story. Anonymous user 1. Wow, I understand that what Hugo did was brutal, but you really don't see how your actions led him to that point? You slept with your own cousin 3 days before your wedding after, according to you, an emotional affair of months. You describe him as an emotionless robot, but maybe his reaction was that of someone who has been so deeply hurt and betrayed that his only recourse was to disconnect emotionally and hit back with the same coldness with which you cheated on him. You are the villain of your own story, but you are trying very hard to paint yourself as a martyr. OP's response: the real villain? A man who meticulously plans the public humiliation of the woman he is supposed to love is just someone deeply hurt? Please, that's being a vengeful psychopath. My mistake was a moment, one night. His revenge was calculated, designed to cause the maximum possible damage, not only to me but to my family. Normal people break an engagement, they talk, they scream, they don't set up a horror movie in a church. He showed exactly the kind of cold, calculating person I always suspected he was. My action was a reaction to his negligence. His was an act of pure evil. Anonymous user I. The way you talk about your cousin Simone is quite revealing. You call him an illusory soulmate. Only now that he has abandoned you. Before that, he was your confidant, the only one who saw you. It sounds like you were building an escape route and using it as a justification to sabotage your own relationship. You felt guilty, and instead of facing it, you projected all the blame onto Hugo, turning him into a monster so you could sleep with your cousin without feeling so bad. And surprise, Simone used you as much as you used him. Two selfish people who destroyed a third. OP's response: it's very easy to judge from the outside. You have no idea what it's like to feel completely alone next to the person who is supposed to be your everything. Simone listened to me. Was he perfect? Clearly not, and his cowardice proves it. But in those months, he gave me the emotional support that Hugo was incapable of offering. I wasn't building an escape route. I was trying to survive an emotional void. Hugo let me die of thirst, and I accepted a glass of water from the only person who offered it to me. Maybe the water was poisoned, but when you're dying, you don't ask. Anonymous user 3. Escaping from a monster like that could be the best thing that ever happened to me. This sentence says it all. You're desperate to rewrite the story so that this catastrophe is a victory. You can't accept that you ruined the life of a man who, as far as we know, from your own biased narrative, was only guilty of being a meticulous planner, and you turned him into the laughingstock of his entire community. The humiliation you feel now is exactly the one you made him feel the moment you decided to sleep with another man. He simply returned the favor publicly. OP's response: a favor? Do you call social annihilation a favor? The difference is that my mistake was private. It could have been handled with dignity, with privacy. He chose the nuclear option. He wanted everyone to see him as the victim and me as the witch. And I see that with some like you, it has worked, but no. This is not a victory, it is a tragedy that he turned into a circus. And if being meticulous means ignoring the emotional needs of your partner to the point of pushing her to the limit, then yes, he is guilty of much more than being a good planner. Update 1. A week has passed, a week that has felt like a century of silence and sidelong glances. The echo of the empty church follows me everywhere. I'm living in a small apartment that a friend has left me out of pity. Why? Of course, I can't go back to the apartment I shared with Hugo, and I can't go back to my parents' house either. My mother calls me once a day to cry on the phone, not for me, but for the shame. My father was more direct. You've made your bed, now lie in it. Don't call us until you know how to fix the mess you've made. Suddenly, I'm a pariah to the very people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. Of course, the first thing I did was try to contact Simone. I needed an ally, someone who was in the trench with me, someone who could corroborate my version of the story, who understood the why. I called him dozens of times. I sent him endless text messages, begging him to answer me. Finally, I got a response. A single WhatsApp message before he blocked my number. This is your fault. You dragged me into your drama, and I'm not going to let you ruin my life. Leave me alone. My fault? He, who whispered in my ear all those things about how Hugo didn't deserve me. Now he washes his hands and blames me for everything. The hypocrisy is astounding. He used me. He saw an opportunity, took advantage of my vulnerability, and now he's running away like a coward. Another man who disappoints me. And then, to top it all off, the mail arrived, a thick, official envelope from Hugo's law firm. Inside there was no letter of apology, no explanation, not even a hate note. There was an invoice, a detailed invoice with every item, every supplier, every non-refundable deposit from the wedding, with my half clearly highlighted at the end. The catering, the flowers, the photographer, the band, thousands and thousands of euros. He demands that I pay him 50% of the losses incurred by the cancellation of the event due to breach of the engagement agreement. Breach of the agreement. Is it that everything for him is a contract? This act, more than the humiliation in the church, is the irrefutable proof of the kind of man Hugo is. There is no emotion, no pain, only numbers on a page. It's not about a broken heart, it's about his wallet. He could have destroyed me with a video, but finishing me off with an invoice is a level of bureaucratic cruelty I never imagined. It's his way of telling me, not only have I humiliated you, now I'm going to ruin you financially. This confirms every doubt I've ever had about him. I was never his fiancé. I was an investment. And now that the investment has gone wrong, he's trying to recover his losses. So here I am, alone, repudiated by my family, betrayed by the man I thought understood me, and now in debt to the monster I escaped from. And people on the internet call me the villain. It's incredible. I'm starting to think about our whole relationship, about small details I used to overlook. The time he criticized a gift I gave him because it wasn't practical. The way he talked about my friends as inefficient social contacts. They were all red flags. It's not that I sabotaged the relationship. The relationship was already dead. He had killed it with his coldness and his pragmatism long before Simone came on the scene. My mistake was not the cause of the breakup. It was the desperate attempt of a prisoner to break a window to be able to breathe. Popular Reddit comments on the update. 1. Anonymous user 4. The invoice is brutal, yes, but it's legal. You broke the de facto agreement by being unfaithful. Financially, he has the right to claim. What surprises me is how you continue to use everyone else's actions to reinforce your victimism. Your parents repudiate you for the humiliation. They are unfair. Simone abandons you. He is a coward who used you. Hugo asks you for the wedding money. He is a heartless monster. In your world, is there any possibility, however remote, that these are the direct and logical consequences of your actions? OP's response, logical consequences? Is it logical for your own family to turn their back on you in your worst moment? Is it logical for the person who was your accomplice to throw you to the lions to save himself? And no, it is not logical for a man to subject you to public psychological torture and then send you the bill. It's sadistic. I'm describing what has happened. If everyone around me acts like monsters after I made a mistake, a single mistake, who really has the problem? Me or a world full of cruel and disloyal people? Anonymous User 5. The relationship was already dead. How convenient is the classic justification of the infidel. Instead of having the decency to end a relationship in which you were not happy, you decided to cheat on your partner, keep up appearances, and go ahead with a very expensive wedding, probably with the intention of continuing to see Simone on the sly. Hugo not only discovered your infidelity, but also the fact that you were willing to lie to him at the altar and trap him in a fraudulent marriage. Perhaps his reaction was not only because of the cheating, but because of the magnitude of the lie. OP's response: a fraudulent marriage? I was going to marry him. Despite everything, a part of me still hoped that things could change, that once the madness of the wedding was over, he would go back to being the man I fell in love with. It's not so black and white. I didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be unfaithful. It was a slow, painful erosion. And it's very easy for you to say, you should have ended the relationship. Do you know how difficult it is to undo a whole life, to disappoint two families, to throw years away? Sometimes you hold on to hope, even when you know it's useless. Final update. The last few days have been hell. Hugo's invoice, Simone's betrayal, my family's silence, everything turned into a snowball of misery. I felt cornered, misunderstood, so I did something stupid, something desperate. I decided to tell my side of the story. I published a long post on my social media, omitting the part about Simone, of course, and focusing on Hugo's cruelty, on his coldness, on how he had emotionally isolated me. I painted him as a narcissistic abuser and his spectacle in the church as the final act of control. I wanted people to see the real Hugo. I wanted redemption, and for a moment, it worked. People shared the post. I got messages of support. I felt validated, but the validation lasted less than 24 hours. The response came, and not from Hugo. It was Sarah, my former maid of honor, the traitor. In the comments of my post, under a barrage of supportive messages, she simply wrote, "Since we're sharing half-truths, here's the whole truth." And she attached a link to the unedited video of my bachelorette party. The video Hugo projected was just a fragment. This was the full footage of almost 10 minutes, recorded with surprisingly clear audio, and it was much, much worse than I remembered. Not only did you see the kiss, the hallway, the closed door. You could hear the conversation Simone and I had just before. You could hear me laughing out loud, mocking the way Hugo organized his shirts by color. You could hear Simone imitating Hugo's voice, calling him the robot and me correcting him. No, it's more like a virtual assistant with a good pension plan. And then the sentence that made my blood run cold, my own voice saying, "The good thing is he's so naive, he'll never find out. He thinks I'm perfect." Seeing it, hearing it, was as if a stranger was speaking with my voice. A cruel, arrogant, and despicable person. The videos spread like wildfire. My messages of support turned into an avalanche of hatred. But the final blow, the one that really broke me, was not public. It was a private message from Hugo's sister, Laura. It contained no insults or threats, just a screenshot. It was from a chat between her and Hugo from the week before the wedding. Laura was asking him if he was nervous, and Hugo's response completely shattered my narrative. Nervous is not the word he had written. I'm terrified, Lau. Terrified of not being enough for her. I love her so much it hurts. All this planning, the stress, it's because I want everything to be perfect, not for me, but for her. I want that day for her to feel like the queen she is to me. Sometimes I get so rigid with the details that I forget to tell her, but I don't know how else to show it. There it was, in black and white. The irrefutable proof. The man I had painted as a heartless robot, as a cold, calculating monster, felt more than I had been able to see in years. His obsession was not for control, it was for fear. His coldness was not lack of love, it was his clumsy way of showing it. He wasn't ignoring me. He was working tirelessly to build the perfect future he thought I deserved. And I, in the meantime, was laughing at him behind his back, sleeping with my cousin, and calling him naive. The armor of an indignant crusader that I had built for myself shattered. It disintegrated in an instant, leaving me naked and exposed to the most horrible truth of all. There was no monster, no villain, only a man who loved me in his own way and a woman so absorbed in her own need for validation that she could not or would not see it. The humiliation in the church was not the act of a psychopath, it was the act of a man whose heart had been torn out, pulverized, and trampled on, not only by the infidelity, but by the cruel mockery that accompanied it. It was the broken, disproportionate reaction of someone whose faith in the only person he thought was perfect had been shattered. I'm sitting on the floor of this borrowed apartment with the phone in my hand. The screen illuminates the screenshot of Hugo's message. I've read it 100 times. The silence now is different. It's not the accusatory silence of the church. It's an empty silence. A void that I used to fill with my anger and my justifications. Now there is nothing, only the echo of my own cruelty and the image of a love that I not only rejected but ridiculed before completely destroying it. I no longer know who the monster is in this story, but for the first time, I suspect that I have been looking in a mirror all this time. Popular Reddit comments on the final update. Anonymous User 6. This is devastating. Thank you for having the courage to share the whole truth. It doesn't justify Hugo's public revenge, but it contextualizes it in a way that makes it painfully human. His reaction was that of a completely broken man, not that of a monster. I hope this is the first step for you to truly understand the magnitude of the damage you caused not only to him and your family, but to yourself. Healing is going to be a very long road. OP's response, I don't know if this is courage or just exhaustion. I no longer have the strength to keep lying to myself. Seeing his words, his vulnerability, is worse than any insult. You're right, the road is going to be long. I don't even know where to start. Anonymous User 6. The irony is brutal. You complained that Hugo didn't communicate emotionally, but the screenshot shows that he did, just not with you, because he probably felt he couldn't. And meanwhile, you were having a deep emotional communication with your cousin that consisted of cruelly mocking your fiancé/family member. Sometimes the people we think see us actually only reflect our worst qualities. OP's response, it's funny, isn't it? I demanded a vulnerability that I myself was incapable of offering. And yes, Simone didn't see me. He saw an opportunity and reflected the ugliness I was feeling inside. It was an alliance of toxicity. It's a very difficult pill to swallow. Anonymous User 8. I feel a strange mix of pity for you and a sense of justice for Hugo. You destroyed that man. Your last update is the only moment in this whole saga in which you have shown a shred of self-awareness. There's nothing to say except that the consequences you're living, however harsh, you've earned them. The real question is, what will you do now with this truth? Will you use it to grow, or will you sink into self-pity? OP's response, I don't know what I'm going to do for now. I can only sit with this truth. There is no self-pity. There is no room left for it, only a void. Thank you, I guess, for reading all this. I don't expect forgiveness from anyone. I don't even know if I can forgive myself.